The rain started just as I pulled into the hotel parking lot, fat drops that exploded against the windshield like tiny fireworks. I sat there for a moment, hands still gripping the steering wheel, watching the water blur the neon sign until it became an abstract painting of red and blue. 3 days. 3 days in Portland with Victoria Chen, no Victoria Hayes, I reminded myself. She'd been Victoria Hayes for 6 months now, ever since the divorce was finalized, though I still sometimes caught myself using her married name in my head. 3 days of quarterly reports and client presentations and pretending that my hands didn't shake every time she walked into a room. I grabbed my bag from the back seat and made a run for it, the rain soaking through my blazer before I reached the lobby doors. Inside, the air conditioning hit me immediately, and I shivered, acutely aware of the way my wet clothes clung to my skin. The lobby was all polished marble and low lighting, the kind of upscale business hotel that tries very hard to feel like it isn't a business hotel. A fireplace burned in the corner even though it was June, because ambience apparently trumped logic. "Ms. Rivera?" The desk clerk smiled at me with practiced warmth. "We have you in room 412. And Ms. Hayes asked me to let you know she's already checked in and will meet you in the lobby bar at 7 for dinner." Of course she was already here. Victoria was always early, always prepared, always 3 steps ahead of everyone else. It was one of the things that made her brilliant at her job and absolutely terrifying to work for. I thanked the clerk and headed for the elevators, my wet shoes squeaking against the marble. Room 412 was generic in that specific way hotel rooms are generic: beige walls, white linens, abstract art that could mean anything or nothing. I dropped my bag on the luggage rack and peeled off my wet blazer, hanging it in the bathroom to drip into the tub. My reflection in the mirror looked tired. At 32, I was starting to see the fine lines at the corners of my eyes that my mother kept telling me were distinguished. I pulled my dark hair out of its bun and ran my fingers through it, trying to coax it into something presentable. My phone buzzed. A text from my daughter. "Mom, did you get there safe? Nana says I have to ask. Also, can I stay up till 10? I smiled despite myself. Elena was 8, which meant she was constantly negotiating for later bedtimes and more screen time and all the small freedoms that felt enormous when you were 8. I texted back, "Safe and sound. 9:30 and that's final. Love you, Mija." The response was immediate, "Fine. Love you too. Nana says you better eat something good." My mother, ever concerned that I wasn't taking care of myself properly. She'd moved in with us 2 years ago, after my father died, and the arrangement worked better than I'd expected. Elena got a grandmother who spoiled her appropriately, and I got someone who made sure there was always food in the house and someone to pick Elena up from school when I was stuck in meetings that ran late. Someone to cover for trips like this one. I changed into dry clothes, dark jeans, a cream silk blouse, the kind of business casual that said I was off the clock but still professional. It was only 5:30. I had an hour and a half before I had to face Victoria across a dinner table, making small talk about client strategies and quarterly projections while trying not to think about the fact that she'd been in my dreams for the past 3 months. Not the vague, forgettable dreams that evaporate on waking. The kind that left me gasping awake at 2 in the morning, heart racing, skin flushed, ashamed and wanting in equal measure. I opened my laptop, thinking I'd get some work done, but the spreadsheet on the screen blurred into meaninglessness. Instead, I found myself thinking about the first time I'd met Victoria, 4 years ago in that same bland conference room where I'd been hired. She'd been the one to interview me, the regional director even then, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, her blonde hair pulled back in a way that made her look severe and beautiful. She'd asked sharp questions about my experience in marketing, about how I'd handle difficult clients, about my 5-year plan. I'd been nervous, stumbling over my answers, hyper-aware of her pale gray eyes watching me with an intensity that felt almost physical. "You're honest," she'd said at the end of the interview. "I appreciate that. Most people tell me what they think I want to hear. You told me what you actually think." I'd gotten the job. Over the next 4 years, I'd watched Victoria navigate office politics with a grace I envied, watched her handle difficult clients with a combination of firmness and charm that seemed effortless. I'd watched her marriage crumble in slow motion, the way she started staying later at the office, the tight set of her jaw when her phone rang during meetings, the day she'd come in without her wedding ring and nobody had said a word. We'd never been close, not exactly. Professional, certainly. Respectful. She praised my work, gave me increasingly complex projects, trusted me with important clients. But there was always a distance there, a formality she maintained with everyone. Victoria Hayes didn't have work friends. She had colleagues and subordinates and people she managed with cool efficiency. Except sometimes, and this was the thing I tried not to think about, sometimes I'd catch her looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Sometimes our hands would brush when she handed me a file, and the contact would linger half a second too long. Sometimes she'd laugh at something I said, and the sound would feel like a secret shared between us. I closed the laptop. This was exactly why I shouldn't be on this trip. 3 days in close quarters with the woman who occupied far too much of my mental real estate was a recipe for disaster. But the client presentation was important, and Victoria had specifically requested that I come along to handle the creative pitch. You have a way of connecting with people, she told me. They trust you. At 6:45, I gave up on pretending to work and headed down to the lobby bar. It was already filling up with business travelers, a cluster of men in golf shirts laughing too loudly at the bar, a woman in a power suit typing furiously on her laptop at a corner table, a young couple that looked like they were on their honeymoon, conspicuously out of place among the expense accounts and networking opportunities. Victoria was already there, sitting at a booth near the windows, a glass of white wine in front of her. She changed too, into slim black pants and a deep blue silk blouse that made her eyes look even paler. Her hair was down, falling just past her shoulders in soft waves. She looked up as I approached and something flickered across her face, surprise maybe, or something else I couldn't name. Sophia, she said, gesturing to the seat across from her. You made it through the rain. Barely. I slid into the booth, acutely aware of the small space between us, the way the booth felt intimate despite its size. The traffic was worse than I expected. It always is in Portland. She took a sip of her wine, and I watched the way her lips pressed against the glass, the small movement of her throat as she swallowed. I forced myself to look at the menu instead. How's Elena? The question surprised me. Victoria rarely asked about my personal life, though she knew I had a daughter. I'd had to leave work early for school events enough times that it was impossible to hide. She's good. Growing like a weed. My mother's staying with her while I'm gone. Your mother moved in with you, didn't she? After your father passed. I looked up, genuinely surprised that she remembered. I'd mentioned it once, maybe twice, in passing. Yes. 2 years ago. It's been good for both of us. For all of us, actually. Elena loves having her there. Victoria nodded slowly, her fingers tracing the stem of her wine glass. That must be nice. Having family support like that. There was something in her voice, a hollowness that made me pause. Victoria never talked about her family. I knew vaguely that she had a sister somewhere on the East Coast, parents who lived in Arizona or Nevada, somewhere dry and far away. But she never mentioned them, never took personal calls during work hours, never decorated her office with photographs of anyone but her 2 dogs. It is, I said carefully. Though my mother has opinions about everything. How I raise Elena, what I eat, when I sleep. It's like being 15 again sometimes. That got a small smile. My mother would probably have opinions too, if we spoke more than twice a year. The waiter appeared before I could respond, saving us both from the sudden depth of the conversation. I ordered a glass of red wine and the salmon, Victoria ordered another white wine and the sea base, and then we were alone again, the silence stretching between us like something tangible. The presentation tomorrow, Victoria said, sliding seamlessly back into business mode. I want you to lead the creative portion. I'll handle the budget and timeline, but the storytelling is yours. You're better at it than I am. I'm ready, I assured her, though my stomach fluttered with nerves. This was a major client, the kind that could open doors to even bigger accounts. I've rehearsed it about 100 times. I know you have. She met my eyes across the table. I trust you, Sophia. I wouldn't have brought you if I didn't. The words settled over me like a blanket, warm and weighted. Victoria Hayes didn't give compliments lightly. She didn't waste words on empty praise. If she said she trusted me, she meant it. Our food arrived, and we talked about safe things, the client's needs, the competitive landscape, the logistics of tomorrow's schedule. But underneath the professional conversation, I was hyper-aware of every small thing. The way Victoria's hand moved when she talked, graceful and deliberate. The small crease between her eyebrows when she was thinking. The way she listened, really listened, her full attention focused on me in a way that made me feel seen in a manner I hadn't felt in years. By the time we finished eating, the wine had softened the edges of the day. Victoria ordered a third glass, which was unusual. She was always controlled, always measured. I ordered another as well, telling myself it was just to keep her company, though I knew that was a lie. I wanted to stay here, in this bubble of low lighting and easy conversation, where the rules felt different than they did in the office. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria's voice was quieter now, almost hesitant. "Of course." She looked at her wine glass, then at me, then away again. "Do you ever feel like you're playing a role? Like you wake up every day and put on a costume and perform the version of yourself that everyone expects to see?" The question caught me off guard. This wasn't the Victoria I knew from the office, cool, composed, always in control. This was someone else, someone vulnerable and uncertain, and I didn't know what to do with that. "Sometimes," I admitted. "With Elena, I'm mom, and I have to be patient and strong and know all the answers. At work, I'm the creative director who has ideas and solutions. With my mother, I'm still her child in a lot of ways, even though I'm 32 and have a child of my own. I don't know if any of those versions are the real me, or if the real me is some combination of all of them." Victoria nodded slowly. "And when you're alone, who are you then?" I thought about that. About the nights after Elena was asleep and my mother had gone to her room, when I'd sit in the dark living room with a glass of wine and wonder how I'd ended up here. Divorced at 26, single mother at 24, building a career while trying to be everything to everyone. About the dreams that left me aching and confused, wanting things I didn't know how to want. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I think I'm still figuring that out." "Me too." Victoria's voice was so quiet I almost didn't hear her. She drained her wine glass and set it down with a soft clink. "I thought I knew. I thought I had everything planned out. The right career, the right marriage, the right life. And then one day I woke up and realized I'd built a beautiful prison." The words hung between us, raw and honest. I wanted to reach across the table to touch her hand, to offer some kind of comfort, but I didn't know if that would be welcome. Victoria was my boss. This was a work trip. We were sitting in a hotel bar drinking wine and having the kind of conversation people have when they're slightly drunk and the normal barriers are down, but tomorrow we'd have to put the barriers back up and pretend this hadn't happened. "I should get some sleep," Victoria said abruptly, sliding out of the booth. "We have an early start tomorrow." I nodded, swallowing my disappointment. "Good night, Victoria." She paused, looking down at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Good night, Sophia. Thank you for dinner. For the conversation." I watched her walk away, her posture perfect even after 3 glasses of wine, and tried to ignore the way my chest ached. In my room, I texted Elena goodnight, changed into pajamas, and lay in the dark staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow we'd present to the client. Tomorrow we'd be professional and competent and everything would be normal. Tonight, I let myself think about the way Victoria had looked at me across the dinner table, the vulnerability in her voice when she'd asked who I was when I was alone. The presentation went better than I'd dared to hope. The client loved the creative direction, asked thoughtful questions, nodded enthusiastically at the timeline Victoria presented. By noon, we had a verbal commitment and handshakes all around. Victoria was radiant with the success, her professional mask firmly in place, all traces of last night's vulnerability gone. "Excellent work," she told me as we packed up our materials. "I knew you'd nail it." We had the rest of the day free before our flight home tomorrow morning. Victoria suggested we get lunch to celebrate, and I agreed, still riding the high of a successful pitch. We found a small bistro a few blocks from the hotel, tucked into a corner building with ivy climbing the brick walls. It was the kind of place that felt like a secret, like you'd stumbled onto something locals didn't want tourists to know about. Over salads and iced tea, we both agreed more wine after last night would be unwise. Victoria was different. Relaxed in a way I'd never seen her. She told me about her dogs, 2 rescue greyhounds named Stella and Gatsby. She talked about the house she'd bought after the divorce, a small craftsman bungalow with a garden she was slowly learning to tend. She asked about Elena, really asked, wanting to know about her interests and her personality, not just making polite conversation. She wants to be a marine biologist, I told her, smiling at the thought. Last week she gave me a 20-minute lecture on the importance of coral reefs. I understood maybe half of it, but she was so passionate I just sat there and listened. She sounds remarkable. She is. I felt the familiar swell of pride and terror that came with thinking about Elena. Sometimes I look at her and can't believe I'm responsible for this whole person. That the choices I make shape who she becomes. You're doing a beautiful job, Victoria said quietly. She's lucky to have you. The compliment settled warm in my chest. We finished lunch and walked back to the hotel slowly, taking the long route through a neighborhood of boutique shops and coffee houses. It felt like we were suspended outside of real life, outside of the office hierarchy and professional boundaries. Just two women walking through a strange city on a sunny afternoon. Back at the hotel, Victoria suggested we get some work done in her room. She had a suite with a sitting area, she explained, which would be more comfortable than the cramped desks in our individual rooms. I followed her to the 7th floor, telling myself this was perfectly normal, perfectly professional. We were colleagues working on a project. The fact that my heart was beating faster had nothing to do with anything. Her suite was twice the size of my room, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a couch and 2 armchairs arranged around a coffee table, a small kitchenette. We settled on the couch with our laptops, ostensibly reviewing the notes from this morning's meeting, but the conversation kept drifting. Victoria told me about her divorce, the slow realization that she and her ex-wife had built a life together but forgotten to build a relationship. I told her about my own divorce, the ex-husband who'd left when Elena was 2 because fatherhood wasn't what he'd imagined, the relief I'd felt when he'd walked away. I've been thinking a lot lately about choices, Victoria said, setting her laptop aside. About the things we tell ourselves we can't have because they're not practical or sensible or appropriate. My mouth went dry. What kinds of things? She looked at me then, really looked at me, and the intensity in her pale gray eyes made it hard to breathe. Happiness, maybe. Real happiness, not the kind you construct because it looks right on paper. The air between us felt charged, electric. I should have made an excuse and left. I should have steered the conversation back to safe territory. Instead, I heard myself say, "And have you figured out what would make you happy?" Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then, so softly I almost didn't hear her, "I dream about you." The words hit me like a physical force. I stared at her, unable to process what I'd just heard, my brain stuttering over the implications. What? "I dream about you," she repeated, and now there was color in her cheeks, a vulnerability in her expression that made her look younger, less certain. "For months now. I wake up and you're there in my head and I can't shake it." I tried to ignore it, tried to tell myself it was just stress or loneliness or anything else. But it's not. It's you, Sophia. It's always you. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. All those dreams I'd had, all the nights I'd woken up aching and confused, and she'd been having them too. "Victoria, You don't have to say anything," she said quickly. "I know this is inappropriate. I know I'm your boss and we're on a work trip and this is probably the worst possible time and place to tell you this. But last night at dinner, when you asked who I am when I'm alone, I realized I've been lying to myself. When I'm alone, I think about you. I think about what it would be like to know you outside of work, to talk to you without performance reviews and project timelines between us. I think about," she stopped, shook her head. "I'm sorry. This isn't fair to you. I dream about you too." The words came out before I could stop them, before I could think about the consequences. I thought I was going crazy. I thought it was just me. Victoria's eyes widened. "Really? Really?" My hands were shaking. I laced my fingers together to hide it. I didn't know what to do with it. "You're my boss. I need this job. I have Elena to think about. And I didn't even know if I knew you were divorced from a woman, but that doesn't necessarily mean." "I'm a lesbian," Victoria said bluntly. "I've known since I was 16. My ex-wife was the only relationship I'd had, and I thought that meant I'd found my person. But we wanted different things. She wanted children, and I didn't. She wanted a big house in the suburbs, and I wanted something smaller, simpler. We stayed together because it was easier than admitting we'd grown apart." "I'm not," I said, then corrected myself. "I've always dated men. My ex-husband was, well, he was what I thought I was supposed to want. But since the divorce, I haven't really dated anyone. I've been focused on Elena and work, and I told myself that was enough. But then I stopped, unable to finish the sentence. But then I what? You made me want something I didn't know I could want, I admitted. You made me think about possibilities I'd never considered. We sat there in silence, the confession hanging between us. Outside, the afternoon sun was starting to angle toward evening, painting the room in shades of gold. Victoria's suite suddenly felt very small, the space between us on the couch both too much and not enough. I don't know what to do with this, Victoria said finally. In all the scenarios I played out in my head, I never got past telling you. I never thought about what comes next. Neither did I. You have a daughter. A life. I can't ask you to risk any of that. You're not asking. I'm choosing. The words felt true as I said them, even though I didn't fully understand what I was choosing. I need to think about Elena, yes. But I also need to think about myself. About what I want. And right now, sitting here with you, I want. I didn't finish the sentence. I didn't have to. Victoria closed the distance between us, her hand coming up to cup my face, her thumb brushing my cheekbone. Tell me if this isn't okay, she whispered. Instead of answering, I leaned in and kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative, both of us feeling our way into this new territory. Then Victoria made a small sound in the back of her throat and deepened the kiss, and suddenly it wasn't tentative anymore. Her hands were in my hair, mine were gripping her waist, and the world narrowed to the feeling of her mouth on mine, the way she tasted like tea and something sweet, the soft sound of our breathing in the quiet room. When we finally pulled apart, we were both flushed, both breathing hard. Victoria rested her forehead against mine. I've wanted to do that for so long. Me too. My voice came out shaky. I just didn't know it until recently. We spent the rest of the afternoon talking, really talking. About our pasts, our presents, the futures we'd imagined and the ones we'd never dared to dream. About what it would mean to try this, whatever this was, given the complications of work and parenting and the fact that we lived in a small enough professional community that people would notice, would talk. About what we were willing to risk and what we needed to protect. I need to tell Elena, I said as the light outside faded to dusk. Before anything else happens, I need to talk to her. She's old enough to have questions, and I need to be honest with her. Of course. Victoria took my hand, threading our fingers together. I wouldn't expect anything less. Your daughter comes first. Always. The fact that she understood that she didn't ask me to keep this secret or rush into anything, made me want her even more. We ordered room service for dinner, too wrapped up in each other to want to go back out into the world. We ate at the small table by the windows, watching the city lights come on below us, and talked about everything and nothing. Victoria told me about growing up in Nevada, about coming out to parents who were supportive in theory but uncomfortable in practice, about building a life that looked perfect from the outside while feeling hollow on the inside. I told her about Elena's father, about the relief I'd felt when he'd left, the guilt that came with that relief. About my mother's quiet strength and occasional infuriating meddling, about the way Elena asked questions that made me rethink everything I thought I knew.